Hi, I want to talk about a region, wine growing region that is truly near and dear to me. I love the wine from this area. And I'm talking about Australia. This is an area that's got quite an extensive history with wine and, well, history in general, but wine in particular. And they kind of go off in their own directions and do things. Now, up until about the 1960s, they were pretty much known for cheap, sweet wine or overly alcoholic wine, fortified in some respect. But kind of came about not a revolution, not a political one, but a wine revolution. There were some folks there who decided, hey, let's start making some good wine. We're bored today, let's make some good wine instead. So over time, they've become better and better at producing wine, and they probably rival a lot of other countries at this point. So let's just kind of take some of it. Now, some of the differences there, I guess, would be worth talking about because their wine laws are not as strict as you'll find certainly in places like France, Italy, or Germany, but all countries have them, of course. So the key thing with Australia, about as strict as they get, is what I call the 85%er, meaning that if they have a bottle that says Cabernet Sauvignon on it, and that's all it says for the varietal, then it has to be at least 85% Cab Sav. Now, if it's a blended wine, like they put Cab Sav and Merlot together, or whatever, they blend two wines, and neither one of them individually is 85%, then of course they have to have both on there, and then they list them by whichever one has the most. If they did, for example, a 75-25 split of Cabernet and Merlot, Cabernet being 75, then it would be a Cabernet-Merlot wine. Or they'd have to list them both, one way or the other. If it was the other way around, where there's more Merlot than Cabernet, then it would be a Merlot Cabernet wine. Similar laws apply in the United States for saying what's in a container of food. Whatever you have the most of gets top billing. So that's a different category entirely. But anyway, so back to Australian wines. Now there's some real stinkers out there. Their techniques are very different, and they've in the last decades they've kind of settled down in some respects to go more of a vineyard or at least a regional wine recognition type name. There again, the 85% rule. If you're going to say it's from this particular area or whatever, it's got to be at least 85% from that area. Now, California, by contrast, their rule is 75%. So if you're going to call it a Napa wine, it has to be at least 75% Napa grapes, just as an example. Okay, so now what have you got in Australia? You have a lot of regular people there that live in the country that like to drink wine. They probably drink more wine than they do anything else in Australia. Wine is kind of almost like we would drink beer in the U.S. It's kind of the ordinary everyday drink. So that means if you're going to have an everyday bottle of wine, it's not going to be an expensive bottle. It's not going to be an extraordinary for content either. So you've got a lot of run-of-the-mill table wine. And a lot of that does get exported to the U.S. and other countries, I'm sure. And you'll run across some of the labels in the store if you look hard enough. See little kangaroos on the label? That's kind of a good clue. But anyway, those are not what I would call top quality wines. They're just kind of the table wines. Some of them are better than others. So we can talk about cheap wines another time. But now, moving off that category, you've got a situation in Australia where they don't really pay that much attention, especially on the low-end wines, to where it comes from. I mean, other than Australia itself. There's a big region of Australia. It would be the southeast corner or area. I'll find a map and throw it up there for you. And that encompasses New South Wales, Victoria, and a little bit of South Australia. That's their main wine growing region. So you might have a bottle of Australian Cabernet and that's all it says, Australia. So that means the grapes might come from any or all of those provinces, or I don't know what they call them over there. Areas, province, I guess would be the best term. So it might be partly from New South Wales, partly from Victoria, or it might be 100% from one of those. But the way they do their lots and their labeling and their production, don't care. They can bring some from here, some from there, put them together in the same bottle. Blend them out, level it out. It's like, okay, this is the taste profile we're getting. If we get this much from that vineyard and that much from the other one, both the same grape, mix them together, then we've got what we want. So that's not an uncommon practice any place. You'll find that in very high-end vineyards. The difference being they're not going to grab the grapes from any place. They're very specific about where those grapes come from. We're going to take some grapes from our South 40 and some grapes from our East 40, and we'll blend those two together. All the same vineyard, all the same people picking. That's the difference. Grapes from 100 miles that way or 1,500 kilometers that way, put those two together, very, very different. Okay, now you go to your higher end wines in Australia. That's where it starts getting better. And of course, they're practicing techniques that are more familiar to the rest of the world now in terms of being a lot more boutique in the sense of these are estate-grown grapes. They're all from the same vineyard. They're all from the same region and made in whatever way that's conforms to those types of rules. They're 85% or more is from this particular specific designated agricultural area or AVA. Don't recall what they call them over there. I don't know if they're AVAs or something else. But anyway, point being, there's some wines from Australia that are very high end, very much worth the money, and then there's a lot that are just kind of everyday table wine. So you have to separate those two in your mind first. And then the next thing I'd like to look at in Australia is if you want to get a grape in a bottle, obviously wine, to me their signature one is Shiraz. If you want the best Shiraz in the world, you go to Australia and get it. That's my opinion. Now you can get some bad ones there, like I say, the table wines. You get away from the table wines, you can get some incredibly phenomenal Shiraz wine. If you're looking at that same grape in a different locale, like the north side of the equator, it's usually referred to as Syrah. Syrah and Shiraz are the same grape. All right, what I have in front of me is one of these amazing finds I ran across some time ago, and whenever I can, I get more of it. This is a blend of Shiraz and Durif. Durif being another grape. Durif elsewhere is known as Petit Syrah. So if you were to take Durif Shiraz and translate it to Northern Hemisphere, then you have Petit Syrah. But this stuff is amazing. I cannot get enough of it. Believe me, I've tried. So Australia, going back to my point, it has some really, really incredible wines. It's got some others that, they're table wines. They are what they are. You pay a low price for a bottle of wine, you're not going to get super high quality. So if you keep that in mind and then look at your market, Australian market, from that perspective, you really do get more what you pay for when you're getting it from Australia. Don't pay that much, you don't get that much. You pay a lot, you get a lot more. So here's to Australia, mates. Down under has it made. Cheers. This is Rioja wine. This is a bottle of it, of course. This is Spanish wine. Rioja is a region of Spain. One of my personal favorites, but then again, aren't they all? Okay, so Rioja is interesting for a number of reasons, historically, and just a lot of little different things. I want to start with the most obvious one here. Now, not all Rioja will do this, but as you see, there's a little mesh type net thing on the outside. That is called a red, probably pronounced differently in Spanish, but it translates to net. And the other term you'll find for it is mala or mesh. So this was originally intended